What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of MUT Tips. I'm your host, Sean Taylor from the Made Up Theater, and before we get started, make sure to like the video down below, comment what somebody would like addressed in a future video, and as always, subscribe on YouTube to be informed of upcoming videos and live streams. Ring that bell. But without further ado, let's jump into today's topic, 5 tips for ending scenes. One of the more challenging things to do in improv is ending your scenes because it's improvised, there's no script, so how do we know when we reach a proper conclusion to your scene? And really the answer is we don't know because it is improvised, but there are moments to look for that are strong, satisfying conclusions to your scenes. And I'm gonna go into some of that here today, which is helpful for the people on stage to recognize these moments so you can heighten them and play with them more, but it's also more important for the people off to the side. You know, the people who are not in the scene, they are the editors. They are gonna utilize that edit technique that I talked about in MUT Tips episode 44. Check that out if you don't know what I'm talking about. But they are looking for those moments because generally we don't edit from within the scene, because it doesn't flow as well. It's more appropriate for the people off to the side to choose to take initiative and edit the scene, and then they get to seamlessly transition into the next scene. So let's jump into a few pointers when it comes to ending your scenes. Tip number 1 is go big. Improv shows are that. They are shows, they are performances. There's an element of it being a spectacle as well, and we need to treat our shows as though they are big and worth investing in. So treating our endings to our scenes as like a big moment is, with commitment, is our way to effectively notify the people off to the side this is a conclusion so they can jump out for that edit. Just like in musicals, right? Anytime a scene ends in a musical, it ends with just a big musical number, right? That is something that is satisfying to see because it is indeed that big exclamation mark. So maybe that's how you end a scene with a musical. You don't even have to have an accompanist or someone on, lights and sound who plays a little track to sing to. We can sing a cappella. Hey, there is a universal instrument that we all have, 2 of them in fact. It's the hands and the feet. So use that and use your voices. You can also commit to like a strong, action-based sequence or an activity. Like maybe you do a chase sequence, or maybe you do a slow motion epic fight, or maybe you even do like a mundane activity as though it's big, like a slow motion epic dishwashing duel, right? Where 2 people who are like roommates are trying to prove that they are the better, more responsible roommates. So they engage in this epic moment of washing dishes and completing their tasks at home more efficiently than the other. That's another way to go big. If anything, commit to the end of your scene because that'll notify everybody off to the side that, hey, they're reaching the conclusion with that rising action, and then boom, you get to that climax, and then we get that edit. Tip number 2 is the callback. The callback is a really effective comedy tool that can sometimes be referred to as like a running gag, or if anything, it's just a comedic pattern. And it starts with a choice, an idea. It could be a fully fleshed out funny idea, or it could even just be something subtle that it hasn't explored its full potential yet. It's just a seed that we put in the ground, we water it, and then we leave it alone. And then we come back to it at some point, and then boom, it's that callback, that refresher moment where everybody is like, that's the thing they did earlier in the show. And it just increases the impact of it tenfold. A show that I haven't seen, but my friends have talked about it so much that I feel like I have. It was an improv show from Improvised Shakespeare Company where one of the actors at the very beginning of this improvised Shakespearean play drank a vial. And the other improvised actors are like, whoa, what is that gonna do? In Shakespearean language, obviously. And the person who drank the vial's like, oh, I don't know, I guess we'll find out later. And they let it go. It was gone. And then later on in the show, about 45 minutes, maybe an hour later, he dropped dead. And then it was just that moment of like, oh, the vial killed him. But it took an hour for that to happen, which made it so much more impactful because the audience, the performers too, forgot about it. It could have just been an idea that disappeared, but no, at the end of the show, it came back and it just made the ending so much more memorable for me, even though I didn't even see the show. Another example of a running gag is in The Simpsons, one of my favorite TV shows. There's an episode where Sideshow Bob, this antagonistic character who wants to kill Bart Simpson, he arrives in an area and he steps on a rake and it smacks him in the head and he goes, ugh. you know? And it's a funny moment, and he just keeps kind of doing it, and then the scene ends. And then a little bit later on in the episode, he just kind of goes to, like, he gets on a boat, and he steps on another rake. There just happens to be a rake there, and again, that is a callback. I think they do it even one more time. So think about like ideas as not just one-offs. You can always bring them back. You don't want to do it too much. That's the point of a callback, is we don't want to attack an idea too much that we just exhaust it and it's already dead. We want to, like, you know, flesh it out. Duck, duck, goose, baby, you know? Our scene is just the duck, and then the goose is that callback, that fun game-based moment. So try out callbacks. Tip number 3 is the status shift. This is a really effective storytelling tool where a character starts at one place, even compared to another character, and by the end of the story or the scene, boom, they swap. It could be a little swap, it could be a big swap. It's all based on the progression of the story or the scene. I go into status more in episode 54 of MUT Tips, so check that out if you want to learn a little bit more about what status is. But it's really great because we as audience members like to see growth, because it feels like we have been told a fully fleshed out story or a journey. We've experienced it, and we saw all the moments, all the choices that led to this status shift. And a great example that I'm going to tell you is from an improv show that I saw. It was like one of the last improv shows that I saw at Comedy Spot in Sacramento. And it was the show You the Musical. It was a fun musical improv show. It was really great. I had a great time. And there was a moment in the show where a character played by the owner of Comedy Spot, Brian Crawl, he essentially was kind of a little bit of a simple character, like a side character, definitely. And he had this little, talent of spinning plates. There was like a talent show that was in it, and he would like call this back a little bit throughout the show, but it was just like a little fun, like physical moment. He committed to it really strongly. It was really funny to watch, but it really had no bearing on the story. At the end of the show, his character and another character played by my good friend Mike LaRosa were stuck in this like giant vial. They were like trapped. And there was a lid on top that Mike LaRosa pointed out, and he phrased this a lot better than I'm going to phrase it, but he was essentially like, if only somebody could spin the giant lid above us to save us. And then there was that clicking moment in Brian Crawl where he was like, oh, I get to use my stupid ability to save the day. And that was his status shift. He was no longer just a little side character. He was now an impact in the story. So status shifts are really effective because they show essentially the conclusion to it's a character arc, It's Luke Skywalker using the Force for the first time, and that alone elicits that eruptuous round of applause from the audience. So try out status shifts. Take a character from one place and bring them somewhere else by the end of the scene. Tip number 4 is bringing it full circle. It's really satisfying to see a scene return from whence it came. And this is called bringing it full circle, where it starts in one place, goes to a bunch of different places, but still comes back to that initial starting place. An example of this in an improv scene might be, like, maybe there's a group of improvisers who are playing characters where they're like a family having Thanksgiving dinner. And they start by just very politely, like, cutting into their turkey, eating quietly. It's kind of pleasant, very subdued. And then at some point, one of the characters drops a line, like, the turkey is a little dry, something like that. It's a snide comment, and then it causes another character, maybe a character who made the turkey, to drop a comment about the other person, and maybe like heighten it a little bit. And then, like, the cranberry sauce is a little bit too tart, or something like that. And they go back and forth, and other characters start interjecting, and then suddenly a big fight ensues, like a food fight. Turkey legs are flying everywhere, gravy's being poured in people's eyes, and it's just chaos. And then suddenly, maybe like grandma says, "Stop it! Can we please just have a nice Thanksgiving dinner?" And then everybody with all of like the food morsels on them, like sit down and just quietly go back to eating dinner, right? That's bringing it full circle. It's more satisfying because we're returning to a point where we started. It was just like no context, just characters just sitting, eating dinner politely. And then they return back to it. But now we have all of this information about the tension in this family and that physical like act of just war against each other, that it just makes this return to the beginning feel like an ending. Another example of this is on Netflix, the sketch comedy show called Auntie Donna's Big Ol' House of Fun. It's a little fun, like quirky, unusual sketch comedy show, but the very first episode, it starts with a song called Everything's a Drum. And all three of them are just kind of like, using everything in their environment, mundane little household things, really weird, bizarre things, and like making it sound like a drum, It's very quirky and very fun and energetic, kind of cheesy. And then at a moment, one of the characters discovers that one of the things is not producing the sound of a drum. And then suddenly, boom, it turns to this tense, like dramatic moment where one character is like looking out of the window with his arms behind his back. And like, essentially it feels like a tense drama movie now, even though it started as just like almost like a children's song, And then the scene kind of gets more tense, and then boom, one of the characters is like, oh no, it's drumming again. And then they go back to the song, Everything's a Drum. And it was like a fun like return to the way it started. But again, the context of the absurd drama hidden within it makes it, feel like an ending again. So try to see if you can return back to the beginning of your scene at the end, like maybe like your two characters like sitting at a bus stop talking, and then you have a journey together, You walk over there and see a brochure for like, the play Hamlet, like auditions, and that causes something with the characters. And then you go over and you see a character who's like at a hot dog stand, who's a vendor, like a friend that you knew from high school, and then you have an interaction with them. And then you return after some other things, you return back to just sitting at the bus stop. And again, that's where you started. That's now where you've ended, but much has happened. So it does not feel like the beginning anymore. It's calling back the beginning, but it is indeed an ending. And tip number 5 is watch stuff. This is really effective, especially right now where we might have maybe some more free time. It's best to just like pay attention to like media, consume it, but don't let it just go in and out. Like pay attention to house scenes in like sitcoms like Friends or Seinfeld or Arrested Development. Pay attention to how these scenes end, How did the writer create the ending, or how did the editor create the ending, Did it end with a callback? Did it end with a status shift or a resolution? Or, how did it end? Did it end silently? Did it end with Cummins' full circle? Who knows? Watch it and just pay attention to that and think, how was this effective? Why was this effective? And heck, even like, could you do something better or something different? Think about that as well, because there's always going to be more than one way to end a scene. So watch stuff, it could be even movies, like pay attention to how scenes in movies are concluding. It could be anything. I really encourage to right now, take a sketch writing class. This is helpful because yes, it is involving a fully fleshed out beginning, middle, end of a sketch, and they got to stick that landing. They have to write it really effectively. So that is a really effective tool, because endings are really like the way that a sketch becomes memorable. It's a way a scene becomes memorable too in improv. So watch stuff, write stuff, practice it all, baby. And that concludes this episode of MUT Tips, everybody. Thank you so much for checking it out. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, again, like, comment, and subscribe. And visit madeuptheater.com for more information about what we're doing. We're celebrating our 10-year anniversary in 2 weeks, so check that out. Go to madeuptheater.com to help us celebrate. Thanks a lot, everybody. I'll see you next time for another episode of MUT Tips. Bye.